Hello, Magic fans, and welcome to the final match of the first ever 1996 professional tournament for Magic the Gathering. I'm Sean Carnes. Along ringside with me is Henry Stern. He's going to be our color commentator for the festivities. He placed second at the U.S. National Championships and was a semifinalist for the World Championships all last year. Henry, it's been one heck of a weekend so far, hasn't it?
Yeah, Sean, it has. There's never been this many quality Magic players gathered together for one tournament before ever. I thought last year's World Championships were big. This is even bigger.
I definitely have to agree with you there. Well, let me ask you a question, though, as a professional player, Henry. What type of preparation is necessary for an event like this?
Well, first of all, you have to come up with a quality deck design. As you know, this tournament, you're required to use 5 cards from all the available expansions in Type 2. You have to think about which cards you want to use, and also which cards your opponents might be using, thinking about how that might affect your deck design as well. Once you've come up with a quality design, you need to practice it against many of the touchstone decks, practice against white weenies and a red blast deck and maybe a control deck. Once if it performs well then, you want to take it to a lot of your local tournaments and practice against as many quality opponents as you can.
All right, now, Henry, we're coming up on the final match. First off, we've got Bertrand Lestrade from France. He's the 1994 French national champion. He placed second at the World Championships in 1994 as well.
Yeah, he lost to Zach Dolan in those finals in a very close match. Bertrand's a very, very strong player.
All right. Now he's going toe-to-toe against Michael Lecanto from Boston, Massachusetts, a virtual unknown quantity on the Magic scene.
Yeah, although Michael's pretty well known in the Northeast area, he hasn't played in a very large major tournament before.
This is pretty much his first big tournament. Now, what can we expect from these two players?
To better understand what we can expect to have happen in this final match, let's take a closer look at both competitors' decks. Michael Lecanto is playing a 62-card blue-white millstone deck. This deck was designed to defeat an opponent not through damage, but by running them out of cards. He liked to control the environment and had a heavy creature suppression element.
Now, you mentioned creature suppression. What exactly is that?
Creature suppression refers to cards that are used to wipe out creatures, and Michael Lecanto has a lot of them. He's using 4 Wrath of Gods, 4 Swords of Plowshares, a Balance, 2 Control Magics. All of these spells can be used to wipe out his opponent's creatures. And what's more interesting is he uses 2 Icy Manipulators and 2 Blinking Spirits and the Mishra's Factories. All of those can be used to help stall out the Stray's creatures should he get them out. Suppose Lecanto has out 1 Icy Manipulator. The Stray has 1 creature, it can't attack. Thus the Stray would have to have out 2 creatures in order to attack. That makes Lecanto's Wrath of Gods all the more effective. But what's interesting is, Lecanto's deck has a very light permission element for this style of deck.
Now, when you say permission, what exactly does that mean?
Permission spells are any spell that you can use to counter your opponent's spells. Obvious examples are counter spells and power sinks and spell blasts. And Lecanto is, interestingly enough, only using 4 counter spells and 1 deflection. Usually in this type of deck, you expect to see quite a bit more counter spells.
So what are the weaknesses of this type of deck?
Well, the main weaknesses I can see are opponents with a lot of spells that need to be countered. But typically these are sorceries, such as Armageddon, Hurricane, Fireball. Even Hymn to Torah could be a problem.
So what's the most unique thing about this deck?
Oh, by far the most interesting, unique, and innovative card in Michael Lecanto's deck is the Hallowed Ground. This card can serve actually 3 purposes for him. 1, he can use it on his Mishra's Factories, effectively turning them into Blinking Spirits. If the Stray attacks, Lecanto can turn his Mishra's Factory into a creature, and then with the Hallowed Ground, block, and then return it to his hand. Also, he can use it as protection from Armageddon. If the Stray casts Armageddon, if Lecanto has out the Hallowed Ground and enough white land, he could be able to turn 1, 2, possibly even 3 cards to his hand, thus negating the effects of the Armageddon. And finally, the Hallowed Ground can be used to allow him to land tax. During his upkeep, if they have the same number of land, he can use the Hallowed Ground to pop one of his lands back into his hand, giving him fewer than the Stray, thus allowing him to land tax.
Okay, Henry, it sounds like we've covered Michael Lecanto's deck pretty well. What kind of deck is Bertrand Lestrade going to play?
Bertrand Lestrade is playing a 60-card green-white Urnum Armageddon deck.
Wait a minute. What do you mean by an Urnum Armageddon deck?
Well, Urnum Armageddon refers to the 2 most important cards in the deck, the Urnum Djinn and the Armageddon. His deck is really based around getting out a big creature, such as the Urnum Djinn or the Autumn Willow that he has, or the Sarah Angel, and then casting Armageddon. When he casts Armageddon, destroys all the mana, makes it very difficult for his opponent to deal with that big creature he has out there. In addition to these big creatures, he has a number of small creatures as well. 4 elves, a couple of orders of Leap Bearer, 2 spectral bears. A lot of times these small creatures can get out early and do some damage too.
Wow, that's a lot of offense, but what does he have defensively?
Well, Bertrand's deck surprisingly has a very strong defensive element, almost as strong as Michael Lecanto's. He also has 4 Swords to Plowshares, 2 Wrath to Gods, 2 ICs, 4 Disenchants, and a Balance. Interestingly, these decks share a lot of cards in common, all of them white.
Do you see any weakness in this deck design?
Well, one of the potential problems of this deck is that the only way he has of dealing damage is through creatures. If his opponent is able to set up an effective creature defense, he could find it very difficult to win. I think a Hurricane or 2 could go a long ways in this type of deck. Another problem is that he's not playing with the Feldon's Cane. You notice how his deck is set up to cast Armageddon, and he's also maybe using land tax to draw the land out of his deck to thin it down. In that type of deck, you really want to have a Feldon's Cane to get a second chance at all that land. And since Lecanto's playing a Millstone deck, I think Bertrand will really wish he had a Feldon's Cane in his deck or in his sideboard.
Okay, Henry, these 2 decks are about ready to go head-to-head. How do you think they're going to interact with one another?
Well, it's going to be a very interesting match. Bertrand's going to try to quickly get out some creatures and hit Lecanto fast, and Lecanto's going to try to set up his defense, and he really needs to get out to 4-land quickly, because at 4-land is where most of his critical creature defense spells are, the Wrath of God and the Ice Manipulator. If Bertrand can come up fast and maybe cast an Armageddon, it'll be to his advantage, but if the game starts to stretch out long, I think Lecanto's going to have the edge.
All right, thanks a lot, Henry, for that analysis.